Thank you for joining us. We have Councilmember Punto and Councilmember Salazar will not be here tonight. Dave's out of town and Cherish is sick. So thank you to her for not sharing that with all of us. Are there any questions about the update agenda? All right, questions about the formal agenda? I just want to confirm who is going to be reading what tonight. So first we have the land acknowledgement.
I can do it.
Oh, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, and then I actually would like to add the resolution you have in front of you for Holocaust Remembrance Day. Would everybody okay with that? So when I ask to amend the agenda, can someone make a motion to add item 7A? So you'll just hit your button, I'll call on you, you'll ask to add that to the agenda, then I'll ask everybody to approve the agenda as amended. And then do you want to read it as well?
Sure,
You have to read the whole thing.
that's fine.
Okay.
Make sure my wallet.
All right, and then we do have a public hearing this evening. Item 10A1 and 10A2. So this is for the zoning and conceptual site plan at 148th in Washington. That's in Ward 4.
Discussing.
Yeah.
You're first, you do one, and Chris, you're doing two?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I think that is it for the agenda. All right, before we move on to the briefings, Nancy?
I have two very brief updates. First, we have given the mayor a statement to read essentially tonight. We do believe that there possibly could be individuals that intend to sign up for public comment, but the public comment that they are wishing to make is related to a future quasi-judicial proceeding for the council. So the mayor does rephrase that. She does have some language to be able to make sure that people understand why we can't take that public comment. Second thing, I know that we've gotten some questions from council members. I imagine council members have been contacted just about questions about immigration enforcement and roles and responsibilities. I'm going to ask Kristen to pull up on the screen. So we have taken another look at the information that's available on our website. I think you have seen a number of times as we scroll down, we have created a flyer to try to reinforce the limited role that Thornton police would have in immigration. So that flyer is available on here, as is our internal policy. But we have also revisited this site, and now you'll see at the bottom we have added some additional resources. For example, the Attorney General has now created an avenue for people to report questions or concerns. You'll see that we have now linked that information on this page too, that is new information that is available as well. We are going to be doing some proactive prompting on our social media just to remind people that these resources are available and coordinating with our economic development group in terms of outreach to businesses. And so just wanted to make sure that you knew some of those communication efforts were getting ready to, that had been updated and getting ready to get some additional attention. Second piece is we know that there have been some rumors of immigration enforcement activity within Thornton. And so one of the things I just wanted to be clear about what communication the city does and does not have. And so sometimes our police department will get some general information about activities that might be planned, but we don't generally have specific information about specific enforcement or specific impact. So, you know, in terms of being able to verify specific arrests or specific activity that has happened through immigration enforcement. Our police department generally does not have access to that information. The police chief has reached out to the regional headquarters in Denver to see if we can establish some kind of point of contact for future questions or information sharing. But at this point, there's not active information sharing from immigration and customs enforcement to the city. So just wanted to clarify that. I think, I understand that there's lots of conflicted feelings in the community, and people, I think, would like for our police department to have more of a role or more information than the reality is that we do have. So, just wanted to share that because I know it is an area of interest for you and many of your constituents.
Thank you. I did see a post on social media just before this meeting from the police department with a link to that website, so that was great. Any questions? Oh, go ahead, Bertie.
Well, I just passed out this text here that I had community leader from Cultivando send this to me, and they've had like kind of like a comprehensive list of things that the community specifically experiencing this situation would need or want. And I was wondering if we could get maybe city staff to connect the dots on some of these things, like if we already have services in the city that can meet some of these needs, if we can connect that. And if there's something here that we might be able to do, we can look into that. But if there's, I think many of these things are things that we might already have specifically around, businesses and things like that. If we can just have city staff look at it and see if there's anything we can do between Alianza, Community Connections, and law enforcement that might be able to support some of the needs of the community, because these are directly from folks who are experiencing this situation as maybe being undocumented immigrants in our community.
We're happy to look into it and provide a follow-up report to the council.
Thank you.
Any objection from the council? Thank you. Anything from you?
Nothing for me, thanks.
All right, let's jump into our briefings. Here it's already fun at the state capitol.
So I'm not really going to do an extended introduction. You're going to be, now that we're in the session, this will be a frequent flyer on your agenda. So I'll hand it to Rob and Peggy.
And I'm gonna hand it over to Peggy. We got a couple of bills we want to talk about. But Peggy, do that.
Happy to fire it up. We are now on our second week of session and have several bills that staff has had the opportunity to review and provide some input on. Just wanted to share a couple of these. They were going to be up in the next week or two. One of them has since been laid over that I can talk a little bit more about. But the first bill is House Bill 1001. This is the home bill, kind of son of Yigby from last year. And as we've talked about a couple times, this would limit local government's ability to prohibit or limit residential developments on qualifying properties up to 5 acres that are owned by affordable housing nonprofit, transit organizations, school districts, colleges, university, housing authorities, and transit districts. The bill limits the local government's ability to restrict such development based on height, number of dwelling units or standards. Local governments do still retain authority to enforce infrastructure standards, life safety codes, and environmental regulations. CML, Centennial, Blackhawk, Castle Rock, and Boulder have come out opposed. New Era is supporting it. This is one of the bills that is coming from the governor's office to try to encourage affordable housing. And as you recall, last year, this bill was killed. A lot of it was really focused on that religion element, which is no longer in the bill this year. So this is one, it's set for committee for next week. So wanted to bring it to you and kind of see if there are questions or thoughts around the bill.
So Metro mayors talked about this over the weekend, and the language that says local governments may not block these projects based on height up to 3 stories or 45 feet density, or impose more restrictive zoning standards than those applied to similar housing elsewhere in the jurisdiction. That seems like complete local control preemption.
Yeah.
Which aligns with our goals. Justin?
Yeah, you said the limit was 5 acres, so properties larger than 5 acres are not applied to this.
That is my understanding, but I will have to go back and double check that in the bill.
We've started to do some analysis based on the size requirements or provisions in the bill to see what properties potentially would fall under that, but we haven't gotten all the way through completing that analysis yet.
You said housing authorities, transit agencies,
Nonprofit housing.
nonprofits,
Uh-huh.
and
Schools, universities, colleges.
What would be an example of a nonprofit housing authority that would have the ability to build on land that they own, that would preempt our ability to control that?
I can speak to that. For example, Maker Housing,
That's
property that they own over, you may be familiar, there was just a rather raucous public hearing about that one not too long ago. That property is likely one of the properties that would be subject to this. And another sort of nuance in the bill is it's also any nonprofit that has entered into an agreement with another nonprofit that has a history of providing affordable housing. So it's essentially an unlimited applicability to nonprofits to use their land to build or to build housing. It doesn't specify if there's any requirement that it be affordable housing, just housing.
thank you.
So I think we all want affordable housing. We all want the options, but we don't want the state telling us what to do. So this this goes against our values on legislative priorities. If council's okay to take an opposed position on this one?
Yeah,
Great.
It is no more than 5 acres that this applies to.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In case that's your decision.
It's interesting. They're trying to grasp at things. So
Was that supposed to make us more tempted to?
it's just a little tiny 5 acres. So they'll do 20 stories, but yeah. All right.
You can't support that without changing our whole legislative agenda.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I agree, so we need affordable housing still, home rule is also imperative, so.
Yep.
Do we know of any of the suggested changes that people are looking at to this? Because I know the builders are monitoring, realtors did go for it, but I haven't had a chance to speak with any of them yet. So I'm trying to understand more of what the attractive pieces are, what they're monitoring, or what amendments they may be hearing.
I haven't seen anybody that is, looks like Jefferson County has an amend position on the bill. And I do not know what amendments they're asking for. I'm happy to circle up with them and get a little bit more insight into what they might be asking for specifically.
And we can keep an eye on this one moving forward. Like you said, it's next week, we think.
Yeah, it's supposed to be up next week.
Next Wednesday, I think.
Yep.
I think opposed is where we stand. And, if we get information between now and Tuesday that changes our mind, otherwise we're still opposed.
The next bill on our agenda is House Bill 1037. This is the bill that's brought by ACLU called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale. It prohibits law enforcement and government entities from purchasing personal data from third parties or sharing data between agencies in connection with criminal, civil, or investigatory actions. The bill defines personal data broadly to include name, address, browsing history, geolocation, biometric identifiers, and other information. Exceptions are provided involving judicial warranties, emergencies, threatening life or safety. And this is one, as I said, it's being brought by ACLU, CML, DAs, chiefs, Castle Rock, State Patrol are all opposing it. The bill is supposed to be in committee next week. It has been laid over for 3 more weeks. I understand ACLU is working on a complete rewrite of the bill. There was a court case that came down this morning out of Virginia around warrant requirements for information that might be provided from technology and personal data. That has kind of, I think, made ACLU contemplate rewriting it and coming up with a different approach. So I'd suggest we come back on this one, and happy to bring you more information on it.
Everybody okay with that approach?
So does it, we won't take any stance, we'll just wait.
Monitor.
Okay.
Is monitor an official stance?
It can be, or I can just bring it back to you next, whatever you want to do. Yeah. And then the next one I was just going to mention was TIF legislation 1065. This is one that CML and municipalities are looking to support. This is another one coming out of the governor's office that would allow local governments and transit agencies to designate transit investment areas and create financing entities that can receive state sales tax increment revenue to fund eligible improvements. The Economic Development Commission can approve 3 projects per year. Additionally, the bill creates a $50 million annual tax credit, almost kind of a pilot program. I know we don't have this one on our official agenda. I think we're still reviewing it, but did want to just highlight that one. That'll be another one we'll probably bring back to you and look for your position on that one. Oh, and then 1005, Workers' Protection Collective Bargaining. As you recall, this was a big fight last year. This was the union's bill to change the second vote that is required in the union process. The bill passed the legislature, but the governor vetoed the bill. The unions have decided to bring the bill back again. It doesn't appear that there are any negotiations going on currently between the business community and the unions. The governor has indicated he's in the same spot as last year. So if and when the bill makes it to his desk, his office has indicated they will likely not support the bill. So I think that will probably be the case. I don't expect anything to change, but who knows? Maybe talks will resume at some point, but that's where things stand right now on that one.
Roberta?
I personally, and just like in this capacity, I will always support that bill because I went through an election with a second vote. I've been through the whole process in Colorado, organizing a union myself as a worker from the ground up, and it's really unnecessary to make people give a second vote. You really, really want to be in a union, like I think people do, right? And so if anybody ever has any questions about that process, like feel free to talk to me about it. Being a worker that went through basically two elections to get to the point where we could collectively bargain. It's just really frustrating to see that the governor continues to take this stance on it. And it's really an injustice to workers where they have the ability to unionize, but have to jump through an extra hoop for some bizarre reason. A long time ago, Colorado decided that was the law. So just speaking from a personal, professional stance, I would support this because it's important for workers to have a voice on the job and for us not to make it overly difficult. So
I've heard the governor's gonna veto it again.
I'm sure you will, but I'm just speaking about it because it's frustrating to me and I don't agree with them.
Did you want to add that?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Yeah, I concur with, Madam Mayor Pro Tem as well. I'm a 30-year, I'm a lifelong, union card member. Granted, I was in Ohio, not Colorado, so we didn't have the two-vote requirement, but, the Labor Peace Act as it is needs to change. This is my personal standpoint. I want to stress that, not as a member of council. I will be testifying in the Capitol in my personal capacity to get this thing across the line. And I do concur with Madam Mayor that most likely, Governor Pulse is going to veto it yet again. I think part of the strategy, this is my own opinion, my fellow union brothers and sisters in labor, the gear is for next year. Obviously, we have a governor's race this year and there's going to be a new governor. So, and it is hope that the new governor will be much more receptive, to the workers to, 1005 this year, if it has to go next year. But, if we do have to take a stand as council, obviously, my personal, I would stay neutral if we took a stand, let's say, sake of argument against, well, I would take a neutral stand on it and abstain and just say, but as a lifelong labor employee, retired labor employee, I have to support this. There's no reason to have two votes to unionize a workplace. So nothing further.
Justin?
I agree with John and Roberta, so, I would support this as well.
I think that for the council position was to stay neutral, but personally support.
When did we talk about the council staying neutral?
When do we talk about that?
No, I mean, I thought we were,
That's what both Roberta and John said,
they want to stay neutral.
but they personally both support.
I mean, if the council wants to go
If we,
for it, I'm all for it.
and that's
you
me
know,
as well, but
staying, like,
yeah, but
Yeah, I'm saying I have one voice towards consensus. If we get there, that I think we should support this. Because they make great points. So I won't go into it because that's just repeating what they say.
Others?
I've had the conversations and some presentations on it, so it's supported. I don't know what the exact number, but we're one of the few states in the country that are
The only.
like the only one.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know that it's our purview as a city to take a position on it one way or the other.
Yeah, I definitely need to learn more about it. I'd love to hear more about this bill.
To you.
To be clear, it does not have an impact on city operations. We're
Right.
called out in the definition as exempt.
That's why, I mean, I don't know that it means any much to take a position as a city.
Yeah, we know it is important for council on this issue, so we wanted to bring it up. It was introduced, so.
It may not be, but I'm still gonna just support it no matter what.
Yep.
I think just our voices as, elected officials in Thornton, it's important that, for me anyway, to say, I don't agree with the governor or other elected officials that aren't supporting this based on the interests of business, because there's plenty of opportunity to, I don't know, have that dialogue, and having a second vote, it doesn't really do anything additional, in my opinion.
There's 4 that want to, 2 that want more information, and I just want to stay neutral because I'm not opposed, but I don't think it's a city issue. Go ahead, Justin.
What's the timeline on this? What was this in committee or is going through a fast track?
It has not been calendared. Let me double check that. I haven't checked for tonight's calendar, but
Well, if it's not calendared, can we send the language to the council so that we can read through it?
Of course, plenty of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My suggestion, that's where I was going, like, since 2 of us, or 3 of y'all wanna get more information and 2 people aren't here. Let's read about it and then we can talk.
Revisit
Next
it.
update.
Yep.
Thank you. Any others you want to throw our way?
no, much more to come.
Justin?
I'd like to bring one to attention to council, and I think this one is going to committee tomorrow. I have a couple of questions for our city attorney's office on it, but this is Bill 1009, the Colorado Mandatory Lethality Assessment Act. I'll just read the first paragraph here. The bill creates the Colorado Mandatory Lethality Assessment Act, which requires peace officers to conduct a lethality assessment when responding to a domestic violence incident and include the results of the lethality assessment in the incident report. If the lethality assessment indicates that an individual is a high-risk victim, or if the peace officer determines an individual is a high-risk victim based on the totality of the circumstances, the peace officer is required to immediately connect the victim to a victim's advocate, either by phone or in person. So this one is going to committee tomorrow, so it is kind of a faster timeline. And one, I believe Thornton already does this, so it doesn't have an impact on Thornton, but I do think it's a very important bill. And so my question to the city attorney's office is this a type of preemptive bill when it comes to law enforcement requirements? That is I know land use is obvious, but what about law enforcement requirements?
I wouldn't want to opine on that. I haven't read this bill, but I could, and get back to council as a whole if that works for you. I can't say without reading it.
Okay.
Our initial staff review was that from an operational standpoint, limited impact. The sense I got is this is already largely happening. But your point about this is potentially a mandate that we
Right.
just happen to be in a position, as if I understand your point, this is potentially a mandate that we just happen to be in the position of already complying with. So what I'd suggest is if we could provide a little bit, give city attorney time to look at it, and we can refine our analysis and send that to council with the other updates, if that would be acceptable. I understand it's scheduled for committee, but
That's
we'll have
okay.
other opportunities to weigh in on it.
Yeah, it won't be something, unless it's just voted out tomorrow. I think we might have another opportunity to make a decision on it, but yeah, I'd like to get that answer, because I don't want to, inadvertently go against our own legislative policy.
Right.
But if we can get a good idea of where that falls into under home rule authority and preemption, so that we can maybe feel more comfortable taking a position on it. Knowing that it doesn't impact Thornton, but it's a very important bill, I think statewide. And I think everybody here agrees how important it is to handle domestic violence incidences with all the different features that this bill talks about.
Will do. We can get back to you in the morning too. Let's take a look at it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on legislative?
Mayor, we will endeavor to get our first report of the bill summary. Peggy sent us 40. I'm sure she's like dreaming up more to send us to look at right as we speak, but we'll get that out at the end of this week along with those analysis if we haven't got them by then. You'll probably be up at Estes reading it. We'll get you the first one here this week.
We're up all night with the ghosts.
Yes.
And just a quick update, it does look like the collective bargaining bill is up on Thursday, February 5th. Just FYI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Organizational review update.
Yeah, so Mayor, members of the council, this is gonna be me doing this report, so. And we will take a little bit of time to review some slides that returning members of the council have seen in depth. I wanna give some time for new members and for members of the public that potentially haven't been following prior updates here. So again, in terms of an agenda, we'll give some brief background. We'll step you through the way that we're evaluating recommendations that have gone through this organization review. We do have a very high level now implementation plan in terms of the way that we intend this year to start making organizational changes. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So ultimately, I think as I stepped into the organization last year. I think there was a recognition that we'd had tremendous growth in the city, that new and emerging needs had started to change the services and the service offerings and strategy that we needed. And so there was an opportunity to step back to make sure that we were both meeting the needs of Thornton today and then also anticipating and planning for the future. And so the city did a request for proposal and asked for third-party partners to help us evaluate these questions that are on the screen. One, to look at the city manager's office to make sure that we were set up to support the council, the organization, and the community. And then to work with our employees through interviews, focus groups, and survey to understand if there were opportunities to streamline. We have many very large departments that have multiple different functions in them to make sure that we were aligning the internal support that the organization needed to think about, again, those emerging needs in our community and the way that we were offering services to individuals and neighborhoods with needs, to think about the efficiency and effectiveness of the way that we were doing capital project design, to think about how our economic development and land use efforts were aligned and working together. And again, just to take stock of what were the stresses in our community and in our organization that we could respond to. Again, as I shared, we did have a third-party partner in this called Blackline Consulting. And their review did a number of different things. One, they did a lot of data collection from information within the organization. They did interviews with key leaders through the organization, including the council. We had a number of focus groups, so some of our key subject matter experts in areas of the report. And then we had a survey that was really highly had high participation rate. Again, we've got about 1,500 employees. We had about 600 employees take that survey from memory. The other piece of that was they did look at similar size cities facing similar kinds of issues to understand what we could learn from peer practice. So this slide has been altered slightly from what the council has seen before. The first, third, and fourth bullets you've seen before. So Blackline has produced a pretty extensive report, was provided previously to the council and to our organization. Fundamentally, the recommendations were in kind of three areas: things that we could do to update our organizational structure, places where we potentially needed to refine policies and procedures and the way that departments were working together, and then more organizational and cultural things to make sure that we were supporting our employees. You see a second bullet here that's been added, and this is particularly true when you start seeing the implementation plan. As the evaluation was happening, we were also in parallel working on the strategic plan. Our third-party consultant did try to reflect those themes coming from the strategic plan. At this point, we have the full benefit of knowing the adopted strategic plan to influence our implementation and evaluation of the recommendations. So in terms of the evaluation process, ultimately, we value the work by Blackline, but also wanted to make sure that we were understanding the implications of their recommendations, and that as we started this process, we were leveraging the good work and knowledge within our organization to make sure that we were moving forward in a way that was most likely to be beneficial and provide success. So we have broken this evaluation process into really 4 phases. The first 2 phases are complete, and tonight's update really is going to be sharing some of those key findings from those first 2 phases. So, ultimately, at this point, we've really focused on the top line organization structure. What's that department structure going forward? What is still ongoing in phase 3 and phase 4 is very detailed alignments of functions and of particular employees. So as those that have been watching this process, in some cases, there are very straightforward recommendations that are made where full work groups are reassigned. There are other places where work groups are sort of divided amongst new departments, and it takes a little bit more refined study to identify the best alignment of different staff and staff skills in that new structure. So right now, that is what we're working on, is detailed org charts for the new departments. And then as we complete those, then we'll start to work on employee slotting and alignment within those new roles. So again, today's presentation is really focused on the outcomes from phase 1 and phase 2. So one of those key decisions that we have made at this point is, at this point, we do plan to adopt the top line departmental structure that was recommended by Blackline. There is one refinement in terms of reporting structure that I'll point out to you on the next slide regarding to our assistant to the city manager, who will take the lead on strategic initiatives. I want to be really clear, and we have shared this with an all-employee call last Thursday. We do not intend to implement these departments exactly as they have been recommended by Blackline. So through workshops that we've done with subject matter experts, we have identified refinements that we think are better suited, and we're working to finalize those refinements again to develop those very specific org charts. But generally, the department structure that Blackline recommended, we do believe is aligned with the strategic plan and beneficial. And I will show you, we have started to map out the phasing for recruitment and organizational changes and implementation. There are some interdependencies here that we had to factor in, and also tried to factor in, again, where were the highest priorities, particularly in alignment with the strategic plan. So most of the council has seen this before. This is, again, the top line organizational structure that was recommended by Blackline. This does really two key things. One is disperses some of the supervisory responsibility in the city manager's office. Currently, there is a very large number of direct reports to the city manager. The secondary roles in the city manager's office have not had significant supervisory responsibility. So this sort of shares some of that oversight, direction, and supervision. The other piece is that it does add some new strategic executive positions. So it creates 3 new departments, engineering and capital projects, that consolidates all of our capital project planning, engineering design, and project management into one function, sort of a central engineering versus a dispersed model through the city. It creates a Department of Transportation to consolidate transportation resources that right now are dispersed across a number of different departments, and hopefully heighten some of the policy role of transportation and our planning efforts, and then consolidates our engagement, volunteer, code enforcement, and then human and social service functions into a single department called community programs, with the idea of having a bit more unified strategy in those efforts. So those are the 3 entirely new departments that were recommended by this. The study also recommended consolidating our planning and economic development functions together so that they could, again, be working in a more lockstep unified strategy in terms of our land use and economic development strategies. It did realign a couple of functions that were considered secondary divisions, makes them departments. the goal was to shift into a more strategic posture when it came to human resources and IT. So historically, those have not been considered departments in the org structure in Thornton. And the last, you do see the municipal court administrator as a direct report to the city manager. Longer term, the study did suggest that the council reconsider where municipal court administration was best aligned in the city manager administrative part of the organization or with the presiding judge. And so, as you know, next steps, we are going to do a master plan that hopefully will help the council understand some of the implications of a change in that regard. This does disperse the functions of our management services department that exists currently in across this new structure. And so the one change that you'll see reflected here is, again, the assistant to the city manager in the recommendations by Blackline. That would have been a direct report to the city manager. We have realigned that as a part of that sort of strategic portfolio that the deputy city manager will be responsible going forward. So from a implementation planning, you'll see kind of two swim lanes. On the top, the focus is on recruitment, and on the bottom line, it sort of trails recruitment. The idea here is to get executive leadership in place and then to refine those organization structures and make the organization changes once we've got that executive leadership in place. So Q1, I think, as the council knows, Brett Henry has been promoted to assistant city manager. And so we have already one check mark against the Q1 recruitment goal. We are currently in the final stages of recruitment for the assistant to the city manager and the second assistant city manager position, and hope still in Q1 that we'll have announcements about those. I will just share as an aside, these are potentially two of the most competitive applicant pools that I've seen in my career. So we've been really extraordinary lucky with the level of talent that we've attracted with those recruitments. In Q2, the next priorities for recruitment, there again are positions that we see highly aligned to some of our objectives in the strategic plan. So bringing in the chief information officer skill set to support some of those technology related goals that we have across the city, transportation director and community programs director. Behind that, in towards the middle and end of the year, moving towards that engineering and capital projects function. And then, as the council is aware, we do have a couple of interim roles in place right now in our Parks and Recreation, in our planning departments. Ultimately, we have purposely deferred those recruitments until we could finalize those org structures to support those recruitments. And ultimately, they're lesser priorities because we have great interim leadership and sort of stability in those functions. As we realign the functions from infrastructure across the department, we will end up with a freestanding water and environmental service, more focused department there. And again, that would be a priority. Again, along the bottom, you'll really see similar sort of sequencing, just trailing that in terms of making internal alignments and changes in terms of implementing those org structures. Want to be clear that once we get to the end of 2026, and I'll have a slide that will address this a little bit, in the future years, there are recommendations in the study that we will need to continue to evaluate, whether that is personnel. One of the commitments we made to the council, we have been holding vacant positions to try to repurpose, retask those to be able to meet some of the objectives out of this. We did, our intent was to make this a budget neutral effort in 2026. There are going to be recommendations that were made in the report that we are not going to be able to fund in this first round of implementation that we'll need to consider in future years. And again, there's many other organizational culture and process things that again, we'll want to continue to revisit and refine and prioritize in future years. So in terms of that implementation plan funding, again, we have accumulated 12 vacant full-time equivalent employees over the last year to be able to support this. The challenge here is not all positions are always equivalent in terms of their value and their funding sources. And so right now our focus really is those executive positions, and then we will revisit other positions that were added. We had recommended to the council late last year, you might remember that we did end up with a savings in the budget due to health insurance. And we had sort of generally kind of bookmarked some of that funding to support this. At this time, we do not plan to utilize any of that funding capacity for this, given the ongoing uncertainty just with revenues. And so as we get a little further in the year, we may be able to come back and modify these recommendations and revisit some of the other recommendations for that. Again, as we start to put together these new departments, we will learn more about where gaps and opportunities and refinements are needed. And so in future years, we'll continue to assess those needs. So again, in terms of the current status, again, phase 1 and 2 of the evaluation are complete. Phase 3 and 4 are ongoing. We do intend to complete those by the end of first quarter and early sort of second quarter, and start to make do individual reach out to employees and departments, work groups that are impacted. Again, we already are underway with some of the recruitment, and we have begun some work to move seamlessly into the next round of recruitment. So we have begun to work on classifications, on compensation reviews to make sure that we are ready for that. And again, we'll start over time to make some organizational realignments. In terms of next steps, communication continues to be, and transparency continue to be a priority for us in the organization. So we're going to continue to provide updates to the workforce and our leaders as new information is available. And again, at some point, we will get to the place of sharing more with the community about what they can expect in terms of some of these new structural alignments and customer service. Again, we do believe that this future organization structure will be a little bit more customer friendly in terms of not really transparency, but just ease of understanding of more plain speak departments that align to what people understand, what they need. And a good example is, I don't know how intuitive it would be for the average citizen to know that they have a right-of-way concern. They need to call the Parks Department. Transportation, hopefully will provide some customer service benefits in terms of really clear organization structure. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
The hiring plan, are all of these positions going to be also internal recruitment as well as external?
That is the plan.
Okay.
We have not, at this point, decided this. We may use a mix of executive search and internal resources to support the recruitment, just given the volume of recruitment. And some of these skill sets are more unique in the marketplace. And so we're just beginning that assessment of what recruitments our internal human resources staff would take the lead on it, and where we might use executive search. But we do intend that we'd encourage internal applicants to consider these opportunities, but also would be doing national recruitments to make sure that we bring in the best skill sets possible for these new roles.
Okay, and then the assistant city manager, that was the one that's the most furthest along. Okay.
So assistant two, interviews happened yesterday and assistant city manager interviews are next week. So they're pretty close, in sequence.
Tansy, you mentioned this, what's the role of strategic initiative? What did you call it?
Yeah, so we kind of call it two different things. So eventually we're gonna have to be, so we call it the assistant to the city manager for strategic initiatives. So
Strategic initiative. Okay, so that answers my second question. So that is that green box at the bottom there.
that's right.
Got it.
It's kind of a mouthful. So my guess is eventually something else that is a little bit, it's sort of like I named a dog Artemis, and 2 days later she's now Mimi for eternity. So I assume that we will end up with something something that is a little more easy to roll off the tongue.
Any other questions? Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. All right, any items from council before we take a break before the formal meeting?
Want to hear a Dr. Cog update?
Sure.
I'm only going to talk about one thing. I think you might probably find it interesting is we heard from the RTD accountability group.
They're making the rounds. They went to Metro Mayors too.
Yes, they are making the rounds. You may have already heard it, and they made some recommendations. It's kind of impressive that they were able to do all that work in such a short amount of time. But one of the biggest recommendations is a change in board structure from the 15 elected board to 9 board members, and then only 5 of them being elected, which, you know, I know it's not our say at all, but I find that, and I think a lot of other of our peers find that concerning, just the
Mayors did as well.
yeah, and you know, Councilmember Kevin Flynn from Denver made a really good point at Dr. Cog, saying that with 5 board members who are elected, that's like each seat is going to be 3 or 4 Senate district seats, very large seat. So, you know, we all shared some concerns about the accountability to the residents of the community, and the reasoning behind that change, at least what we heard at Dr. Cog, was that they really felt the need for professional expertise on the board. So the 4 appointed members would be essentially technical, they'd have a technical background appointed by the governor. And it sounds like that these positions would be paid a fairly high salary.
Our concern also was that the governor would be appointing those positions, and the mayors did not want any governor, because their excuse was, well, it won't be Polis. So it doesn't matter. We don't want any governor
It's a lot.
appointing seats to something that has accountability to the people. If he wants more expertise, let them hire more experienced people in the staff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking is, I'm not sure that putting technical expertise on the board solves their technical problems. So, the downside is I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do except for, you know, talk to our legislators, because ultimately I think the assembly has to approve that, and I don't think we know what's gonna happen, but that was one thing of, I'll just share that one with you, so. You wanna know more about
Glad
it?
Dr. Cog is aligned with Metro Mayors.
Yeah, no, they generally are,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'll provide more later.
Thank you. Did you have something, John?
Yes, so since we do have some time, I attended my first North Area Transportation Alliance meeting last week, and congratulations to Councilmember Martinez, he's the new chairman of NADA. I'll just be very brief on this, though. We had I attended the open house for the I-25 corridor at Thornton Community Center when I was, you know, when we were still in campaign mode, and great feedback from folks. But when I went to NADA last week, they're throwing a monkey wrench in. They're like basically the I-25 corridor funding will be conditional on us predicating bus tank. So that was that didn't really go over very well with folks. So there's gonna be some hard conversations that are gonna have to be made. And now bus tank's an important tool, don't get me wrong, but still the point was it should have been, my view is it should have been part of the project from the get-go, not just, oh, by the way, the 11th hour. Oh, in order for you to get this, you need Mustang as well. Cause we see the accidents on I-25 every single day. And so, but we're gonna have to come up with something, but it was a nice little first, first meeting. I mostly just kept quiet about it, but I did bring up to, after the presentation, the fact that wasn't at the open house, because that's a concern, because now we're throwing stuff in that, that our neighbors are unaware of. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other updates from council? All right, we will take a break. See you in 20 minutes.